Okay, now we're recording. Uh, so this is, we ended basically here, the slide before this, so this is kind of where we need to pick up. We had already talked a little bit about natural selection. Nature does the selecting. So let's say that you're in let's say that you're in an area where you have deer. And the Alpine house that I have is, that whole area building, that whole development out there is somewhat new, and there are lots of deer out there. In fact, we've got this one lady, and she feeds the deer. Oh my gosh, she feeds the deer. So they put out hay. She makes beans for the deer. She cooks beans, and she cooks rice, and she pancakes, and she cooks for the deer, and she puts it all out. So what happens then, all these deer come in, and of course they feed, and instead of relying on their natural resources, grasses and so forth, then they're feeding off of whatever she's producing for them or giving them, and so then they have more offspring. Well, so then the numbers that we have in terms of deer, the beer numbers, excuse me, that must have been Freudian. It's close to the weekend, but so the deer numbers are really large. So what we now have, we have mountain lions moving in. So they know where the deer are, so the mountain lions move in. The mountain lions go, we got some tasty deer down there. So the mountain lions obviously are going to chase the deer. I guess it's a herd. It wouldn't be a flock. But they're going to chase the deer. And the deer that would be the slowest, that's going to be the one that's caught. So if it didn't have as much muscle mass, could not run as fast as all the other deer, then of course it would get caught and it would be weeded out. So nature selects out the weaker members of the population. In that case, that would be the slow deer or the sick members of the population. And obviously then you do get the fawns, which are beautiful. If it's, say, a springtime, then you have those, and those get picked off pretty quickly too. So that's pretty horrible because as much as I dislike deer, I do like the little fawns with the spots on them. I think they're just amazing. But anyway, so it's not hard to understand. Nature does the selecting. So what's going to happen then is you develop this population of really fast freaking deer. They got lots of muscle mass, and those things can run. Well, what's going to happen to your mountain lion population? All of a sudden it's like, well, we're going to have to run faster in order to catch those deer because they're really fast now. They're a lot faster than they used to be. Give it 1,000 years. They'll be a lot faster. All right. So then the mountain lion population, those that can't catch the deer, they're not going to make it. There will be certain mountain lions that will not be able to catch deer. Obviously, they're not going to make it, and they're going to die off. So then the mountain lions that had the genetic combination that would produce more muscle mass, those are the ones that survive. Those are the ones that pass their genes on to the offspring. So now we have a population of mountain lions that have an overall stronger muscle mass and can catch the deer. So that just continues and continues. So the deer get faster and faster and faster over time, and the mountain lions get faster and faster and faster over time. So you constantly have this change. That's evolution. You're getting an evolution. The gene frequency to produce more muscle mass is certainly changing over time. Put it forward 100 million years. What do you got? I don't know. Some pretty strong deer. Like some deer that'll kick your butt. It's going to be scary. So there's a deer, run. Now you see a deer, it's like no big deal, but in 100 million years, I don't know. I think I'd be a little bit afraid of those deer. I think they're going to be pretty big and muscular, be like a moose or something by that period of time. Okay, so and you always get this overproduction that does happen. That's always going to happen. Let's say that you have a pond, and in a pond you have your, let's just use frog as an example. So you have your population of frogs, and I don't know if you understand about frog reproduction, but it's very cool. But so what happens there, the females will go into the pond and will lay the eggs into the pond. And then the male will come and will go on top of those eggs and will release what we typically call sperm. But when you're talking about frogs, and it's the only animal species that I'm aware of that you do not call that gamete, that sex gamete, you do not call that sperm, you call it milt, M-I-L-T. Have no idea why, but it has another name. Anyway, so they release the milt over the eggs. Well, not all the eggs are going to get fertilized. Sperm don't have eyes. You know, some of them swim off that direction. The eggs are over here. So, you know, you lose some of the gametes. Plus, then you have fish in that water. Some of those are not going to make it, and they get eaten by the fish. But even out of the thousands and thousands of eggs that do get fertilized and do develop into tadpoles, which if you've never watched a tadpole develop from a tadpole to a frog, you should do that sometime because it is fascinating. You know, it's a fascinating process. I remember as a child, we would get rains, and I grew up in West Texas, and in my most early years out in Goldsmith, if y'all know where that is. And back at that period of time, there was a pretty large population of people out there. They had some gas plants out there, anyway. And you know, it'd rain, and we'd have these fairly large ponds. And I'd go out and find one that was large enough where I could watch the little tadpoles develop from the early stages, and eventually they sprout the back legs, and of course they have a tail, and eventually they sprout the front legs. And then one day you go out there, I'm out there every day after school just looking at the tadpoles. One day you go out there and they're not in there anymore. Well, you know, they went ahead and the tail was slowly absorbed into the body, and then they were frogs. And they hopped out, and at that point they were adults at that point. Really fascinating and fun, and I loved my early years and growing up and spending a huge amount of time outside. I think it helped me significantly to become who I am and what I love, and you know, this field of biology. It made a huge impact on me because I spent all my time outside. You know, I hated to go in at dinner time. I hated to go to bed. I just wanted to spend my time outside. I'd build a tree house, and I was like, you know, Mom, I can just live up here. I can come down for meals, but I can live up here, and I will get on the school bus, you know. But if I could just live in that tree house, that would be so cool, you know. And they'd have these big flares that would flare up, you know, when they do gas flares. I don't know if you ever watched that. And the whole world is orange, you know. So then I could climb down out of that tree house, and I could go out and about and wander through, and the whole world would be orange, and it'd be the middle of the night. I would sneak out at night in order to live in that world because I thought it was a lot of fun. You know, you're totally light, totally orange. And that's cool. Okay, I got off base. Way off base. But, okay, so, you know, some of the eggs get eaten, the fertilized eggs, which are called zygotes, those are going to get eaten. Some of them never get fertilized, so they're never going to develop. And so then, even though you do have thousands and thousands of frogs that will go ahead and develop, but a lot of those can't make it because there isn't enough food in that one pond to be able to support that number. So there's a competition for survival, a competition for food, a competition for mates. There's always going to be a competition that goes on. So many do not make it. So here again, you have the strongest survive, the fittest survive, and that's always what is going to happen there with the population. And it happens with the human population as well. Now, of course, what we use as the fittest survive, you know, maybe that's changed a bit. Now maybe it's the dollar bill. Those who have the most, you know, dollar bills, those are the fittest in our population. You know, it's not the individual who can chase down the rabbit and grab a hold of it and you know and choke it to death and then put it over a fire and cook it. You know, I mean, we're not doing that now. Or if you are, then you know you're one of a few that are out there doing that. You're one of them doomsday preppers kind of people, and I love to watch those shows. I think they're pretty cool. But okay. So you know, we kind of pulled out of nature. You know, we kind of built our own little environment, and we've got it cooled or heated, and you know, we go to the grocery store to get our food, and somebody else grows it. We don't grow it. We don't kill the animal. Somebody else has to do that, and they skin it for us, and they prep it for us, and they cook it for us, and they box it up, and all we got to do is throw it in the microwave and eat it. You know, I mean, we're not living in nature's world anymore, and we really don't have predators. It's a predator to a human being. What's that going to be? I guess a mountain lion. Sure. So you know, lions, tigers, and bears. You know, we do have some predators, but we're typically not in those environments. We don't go into those environments very often, or most people don't spend a lot of time in those environments. So, but there's always going to be an overproduction of offspring, and you know, we will reach that point within the human race where we do have an overproduction. That will happen. It's called the carrying capacity, meaning on planet Earth, there can only be so many humans on planet Earth, and we will not be able to support any more than that. We're not there yet. We're not at carrying capacity. If you want to have 12 children, I think children are the grandest things on the planet. You know, I support you 110. You have 12 children. That's great. That is super. I hope all of you do. Hope everybody in this room has 12 children or 15, whatever you want. Get after it, and you know, bring them by, show them to me. You know, and I'll give them candy. I usually keep candy in the office just for children and adults like myself who like to eat candy. Anyway, but you know, you get to a point where there's going to be an overpopulation, and we're not there. But you know, we're beginning to see some problems with water, you know, and all kinds of problems, obviously, which you notice and you do see happening and occurring. But we're not at that point. We're not at what's called carrying capacity just yet. But you know, it's part of the process. You know, we really aren't any different than any other animal on the planet in terms of producing offspring and eventually getting to the point where we do have overproduction, that kind of thing. Okay, and this is an example on this slide where they're showing how you could very quickly change the genome, the number of a particular the frequency of a gene in the population. Here you have beetles. Now there are more beetles on this planet than there are any other animal. And Charles Darwin, that's the one thing he studied. He studied beetles mostly. He loved them. He categorized them. He studied them. He collected them. And man, if you were going to study one particular animal on this planet, to choose beetles, you're serious. That man was serious. He studied beetles. I'm like, whoa, how did he come up with that? You know, I guess he was like, he liked them. I'm not really sure. Or he saw a lot of them, so he decided to do that. Anyway, these are just little beetles. And so what we're looking at here, you do have some white ones and some that are medium color, then you have some dark ones. Well, wherever these tend to live, they're living against a darker background. And so the ones that will be eaten first, of course, are going to be the ones that are more lightly colored. So, you know, you pick off the ones that had a gene structure so that their pigment would be lightly colored. And the birds obviously would be the force of nature that would be selecting out that particular gene combination. And what you're left with are the gene combinations so that you do have the darker colored beetles. And so very quickly you can change that gene frequency from the number of genes that were producing light-colored beetles to the number of genes that have dark-colored beetles. So, I did the same thing, gave you the same example, except I used pulling weeds and did that myself. So, that's a real live example that I did, and anyone in this room can do. So they're just showing you in this next slide the evolution of the elephant, which is well documented. And also on the whale, interestingly enough, the whale was at one point a land animal. It wasn't an aquatic animal. It's a mammal, just like we are mammals. It produces mammary. It has glands that produce milk. It gives birth to a live offspring, and that baby whale, has to feed from the mom. And it does have hair, but not a whole lot of hair. So mammary glands and hair, those are distinctive and what they call characteristics, distinctive characteristics of mammals, hair and mammary glands. So we all have hair and mammary glands, except mine don't work, and I'm very thankful for that. We'll let the women take care of that process. I have no desire myself. Okay. Now, there is a process to science. If you're going to study science, this is what they many times call the scientific method. You may want to write it down as the scientific method. This is the method of studying science, the process. And here's the process. And this is any science, any one of them. So it doesn't matter if it's geology, physics, chemistry, biology, and any division of those, oceanography and so forth. The first thing that obviously you would have to do, and this is just logic, pure, total logic. And some people's brains don't work on logic. A to B to C to D to E to F, they don't work. Their brains don't work that way. A to B. My brain just works A to B to C to D. I was talking to Mr. Stacy this morning, and he was outside smoking a cigarette, and many times I go out there with him just to visit with him while he does that. And we were talking, and I was visiting with him about building a house, and saying, well, did I know how to build a house before I ever built a house? No, I didn't have a clue as to how to build a house. But, if it's like you're doing a project, then you have to go, okay, well, where do I start? Well, I can determine where to begin the process, and then once the process begins, and I can look at it and go, all right, what do I need to do next? And then I go, okay, what do I need to do next? And then what do I need to do next? So I can go to A to B to C to D to completion. That's not a problem for me. Very simple. For some reason, it's just the way my brain works, and I approach everything like that. If it's mowing the lawn in Alpine, then I start where I pull the mower out. That's where I start mowing, and when I'm finished, I finish at the point basically where the mower goes back in. So I've got a process, and I look at it and I figure out, okay, before I ever begin, where do I need to start? Where do I need to end? And it kind of runs through my brain, and as I'm doing it, then I've got the whole system set down, and I mow the lawn the same way every time I mow it. And some people whose brains don't work that way, they go from A to D to M to whatever. They're jumping around. They're going to mow a lawn. Those are the people you do not want mowing your lawn, because who knows what you're going to get out of that. Those people are the people who are typically your artistic people, your artists, your dancers, the people who do theater, plays, and write songs, and the artistic people. Their brains don't work that way. A to B to C to D, and I know plenty of those. In fact, I'm always attracted to people who are very artistic for some reason, in terms of wanting to get to know them, because I find that real fascinating, because I'm just not like that at all. So I find that type of person to be very fascinating. and enjoyable to visit with and get to know. Um, People like me, I don't get to know them. You know, I already know people like me. I'm me. You know, I already know A to B to C to D. I already know how that works. But those others are kind of fun. Anyway, so this is just a logical process. Is a scientific method. If I'm going to study anything in science, then step one, obviously, you have to identify your problem. You know, I'm gonna study the effect of um, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Of course, they do. It's called global warming. You know, so what are the effects? Well, step two is find out what is known at this point in time. You know, would you go out to discover the effects of carbon dioxide when they have studied this and they already know, well, it causes this and it causes this and this is what happened and it's doing this to the oceans and it's doing this to the atmosphere and it's making the planet heat up and these are the effects of that and we have evaporation that occurs more rapidly and all this information is already being collected, studied, collected, documented, printed, is available. You go, pull it up, Google it, it's there. Go to a journal. It's all there. So, what you're really looking for is you want to find an aspect of that has never been studied. And that's really pretty easy to do, believe it or not. You think, well, they've studied this and studied this, so they've got it all down. Well, there are aspects of it that have never been touched on yet. And so that's called research. Second step is to find out what's been done. Do the research on it because you're looking for something that has never, ever been done. No one's ever looked into it or looked into it from that particular point of view, that aspect of it. Okay, so once you've identified what has been done and what hasn't been done, and you decide which part of what hasn't been done you want to look into because you did that research, then you come up with what you consider to be your solution to that problem. Okay, global warming is obviously, carbon dioxide production is obviously causing several different things to occur on the planet. So, destruction of the coral reefs, acidification of the oceans, which is causing massive numbers of problems, which I will tell you, 90% of our oxygen in the atmosphere comes from the oceans. Well, if we start killing off the algae in the oceans that are producing 90% of the oxygen that we're breathing, I don't know about you, but I'm looking at this thinking, we are so screwed. This is not a good thing. This is not a good thing. Oh my gosh, we better find a solution. All right. So, let's look at some aspect of that somebody's never thought about. Let's try to find some solutions to the problem, and I hope they're out there looking. I hope they're trying on this one. All right. So, what you want to do is present, because you're studying this, you've done the research, and you found an aspect or the point of view which no one's ever studied before. So what you want to do with that is you want to put forth then what would be called a hypothesis. And we've all heard of a hypothesis. That is just an educated guess as to your solution, what you consider to be the solution to the problem. Educated guess. Okay. You're educated because you've already done the research on it and you know what's out there, but you found a little aspect no one has ever messed with. That's what you want to study right there. And you want to present your solution to the problem or to a part of that problem, because the problem is multifold. Multifold. You're talking about the atmosphere, you're talking about global warming, you're talking about acidification of the oceans, you're talking about acid rain, destruction of forests, it's a multifold problem. So, you're going to identify one little aspect of that you want to look into and you're going to propose a problem to that particular aspect of it. Okay, so the next part of that would be testing. Go out and test it. Test your hypothesis. You know, you think you have a solution to some aspect. Run a test. Now, your test is either going to turn out to be correct, yes, it worked, or no, it didn't work. Well, if it didn't work, then go back to your hypothesis. Look at it again and go, okay, evidently I need to rethink this hypothesis. I tested that, and I was proven to be wrong. My hypothesis was wrong. My educated guess was wrong. So then you have to rethink it, restate a hypothesis, and then retest. And that's done over and over and over and over until you eventually get to a point where your hypothesis is proven to be correct over and over and over. And other people can run your hypothesis and test it over and over and over. And a great many people can test it and run it over and over and over. And the reason they can is because you have documented that. You have written this up in scientific journals so that anyone else who's looking at the effect that you're looking at, that particular aspect of it, they can go, when they're doing their research and they want to come up with a hypothesis to try to test, then they can run that one if they want to, just to see if you were actually accurate or maybe you did something wrong, and that does happen. People do produce and print articles, and something about their testing mechanism was really wrong. They didn't do it correctly, and you may find that. And then so you're going to go, well, the hypothesis I think is good, but your testing methods were wrong, and this is what I think you really needed to do, and I'm going to run it that way, and let's see how it turns out. So, there's a lot of peer review. It's called peer review, a whole bunch of that. In fact, that's what you do if you're in graduate school. You do peer review. They'll hand you an article, say read it, see if you can find a problem with it. And it's amazing at how many times you do find problems with what has been written, and if you're working at a university, they have to publish, and they have to publish quite a bit. So, and a whole lot of what's coming out is, they may consider to be accurate, but as a graduate student, you can look at it and you might be able to find, well, I don't think this testing mechanism was right. And so then, you can email that individual who wrote that and say, well, I don't think this was correct. I think maybe you need to try something else here, and this is what I think you need to do. And so, eventually you get to the point to where that hypothesis is proven to be correct every time, no matter who looks at it. All the testing mechanisms are correct. And at some point, it becomes such a well-substantiated hypothesis is proven to be so correct that what you have developed there is what they would call a theory. That's such a well-substantiated hypothesis that so many people have tried it, and it's always proven to be correct, that you are at a theory. Okay, there is one more level on scientific method. And the highest level, depending on which science you're in, highest level is what we call law, scientific law. And that's irrefutable, scientific law. It's proven to be absolute fact. Now, in biology, we do not use the term law, we use the term principle. But that's the end state of that scientific method, principle. And like I say, evolution, it's now is a principle. It's no longer just a theory. So those are the steps to what I call scientific method. That's what you do, and you need to be able to develop a scientific method or be able to explain how that works. It's very important to understand that mechanism. Anyway, we'll talk more about that later. Okay, two types of data typically you collect. One is what they call qualitative. Now that's the quality. You know, I mean, that is your quality. So qualitative data, and then quantitative. Quantity is how much. You know, how much data do you have? How many times have you tried this? How much data have you collected? So what is the quality of that, and what is the quantity of that? How many times has this been done? You know, were the testing mechanisms correct? What's the quality of that? You know, did you do that accurately? Quality and quantitative. That's always two factors you need to consider. We did talk about scientific theory again, well-substantiated hypothesis at that point. And all experiments are a controlled experiment, which means when you run a controlled experiment, and if you don't, your information means zippity nothing. So you have to have a controlled experiment. A controlled experiment would be, say, for example, if I wanted to test the effect of, oh goodness, and I'm sure they've done it. Well, they do it all the time. Let's say that there's some new drug, some pharmaceutical company comes out with some new drug, and before they put it on the market, well, the FDA, they're going to make them test it to make sure. So whatever the effect is, they want to see whether or not, you know, if it's some Viagra-like product, to see if it actually does what that product's supposed to do or not. So, you know, they have test subjects, and, you know, so they give, let's say, a group of 10 men, same age, approximately same weight, you know. So it has to be standardized. Everything about those people should be very standardized. And they're given the product. And so we'll just use that as an example. I've always found that if you use something sexual as an example, people tend to remember it. And maybe it's just my mind. I don't know. Maybe I'm the sick one here. All right. But, okay, you also give a placebo, which means you give a pill to 10 other men that are of the same age, same weight, so forth. They're the control group. They do not get the actual what you would call experimental variable. That's the one that would be the Viagra-like product. So say they're coming out with a new one that will, you know, be able to work for 1 full month, you know, instead of just 24 hours or whatever. So there's a joke out there, you know, it takes you on a Viagra. It takes it 1 hour to kick in, you know, for kind of like going to Six Flags. You got to wait in line for 1 hour for a 5-minute ride. That's the joke. Okay. Anyway, you know. Anyway, all right. If that bothers you, I'm sorry, but I apologize. I tend to think some things are funny that other people don't. But okay, so you give one group, and they're the control group. They do not get the Viagra-like product, the new one, you know, and then you do a comparison of the two, because you have to have something to compare to. And obviously, if you don't have a group that's getting the placebo pill, something that has no Viagra product in it, it's just a sugar pill or whatever, then you have nothing to compare to see if you did get, or what the effects were. You know, maybe all of a sudden, you know, their nose hair started growing, you know, 3 inches long. You know, you don't know what the effects are going to be. You know, so let's not put that pill on the market, because we don't want our nose hairs to grow 3 inches long. You know, it didn't have any effect on the penis, but, you know, nose hair did a really good job with that. So if we need a nose hair pill, we got one. You know, we got that puppy down, but it didn't do what we thought it was going to do. So, let's make sure we test it really, really well before we put that thing on the market, and make sure that we find out what all the effects are. And of course, from watching commercials that, they come to find out later that, wait a minute, they thought they had this one down. They thought they'd done all the testing, but, it now causes something that they didn't know. So you get all these lawsuits going on. And then you got all these lawyers that are just like, please call me. I'll sue them. I'll get you. I will get you money. Of course, they're trying to make themselves money in the process. All right. We also, in terms of evolution, I'll get away from that topic, but the scientific method. But in terms of, again, getting back to evolution, I know someday we will get off this topic, but we have done artificial selection. If you buy a particular breed of dog, like my parents, they, for whatever reason, like Basset hounds. Those are so weird. So weird, beyond weird. Their legs are only, what? You're looking at 6-inch leg for an animal that is, gosh, 4 foot long? Are you kidding? Like they just drag the freaking ground. Those poor dogs. And then their noses are 6 inches long, and their noses are just constantly going all the time. They get these long old ears. Let's compare that to a Chihuahua. That's called artificial selection. You select out the traits that you breed for traits that you want. Okay, so over a period of time, we have bred cows now that they just crank out milk like crazy, very fast, and a lot of it. And they're just constantly milk coming out of that cow. And they got them lined up, and they've got them hooked up to machines. I've seen it, and the machine is just pumping that milk out, putting it in little vessels, and away they go. The truck just moves on down the road. They keep pumping that milk out. They now have, I don't know, it's artificial selection. We've just been doing this for years and years and years. So just going back to dogs, that's a pretty good example. But we do it also with other things, artificially select for traits, which we find to be beneficial to us. So if it's a dog that you really need to be able to smell really, really well for whatever it was originally designed for, in terms of a Basset hound, they're well designed. They found a dog that could smell really well, and they bred it with another dog that could smell really well, and they continued to do this kind of thing until they ended up with a Basset hound. That's what you end up with. So, artificial selection. Well, so we've been manipulating a genome, the gene combinations of organisms for a long time, and now, my goodness, if you go into, I always think of Bush's chicken. If you go in and you get some Bush's chicken and you get a chicken breast, that chicken breast is humongous. It's huge. They've got these chickens out there that must be mammoth. Someday they're going to have these chickens that are going to be the size of ostriches. Give them 10,000 years, you'll have these ostrich-sized chickens, so we can have all this chicken meat. It's going to be crazy. It just gets crazier and crazier. But I always look down the road and think, what's that going to be in 10,000 years? That's going to be weird to us. But over a period of time, we just kind of don't notice all that going on. It does happen, but Bush's chicken now, those chicken breasts are humongous. But if you buy a chicken, without any, without any antibiotics, without any hormones or so forth, that's free range and so forth in the grocery store, those are not big chickens. Not. But we do a lot to the foods that we eat these days in order to increase the quantity that we're going to get out of that animal. Certainly, been doing that for a long time. So there are problems with doing some of these things, like in case of antibiotics. Of course, those have been used and used and used. I think most of you know now we've got antibiotic-resistant bacteria, such as some staph, that is very difficult to eliminate. I had a friend that went into medical center, and I don't want to trash medical center. I don't want to speak bad about them, but this is a true story. Battery's dead. And that I like to watch it pretty closely because they do. They will go out on us. Okay, we had to change a battery. The last one died on us. We try to keep them, keep two. We try to keep two of these things charged, but sometimes we get caught. We did get caught on that one. Anyway, so we have moved on to the slide where it's talking about evolution of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which is what I was talking about. And I was just mentioning the story about a friend of mine who had gone into medical center, and now I don't even remember at the time I did, and it's been like, maybe 4 or 5 years ago when this happened, and he went in just for some minor surgery, like some little foot surgery or something, which wasn't a big thing. I don't remember. But he did get an infection, so they started treating him with antibiotic. Well, the antibiotic didn't work, so they tried another antibiotic. That one didn't get rid of the infection. Tried another antibiotic. Tried another antibiotic. They fought that for about 2 years. He eventually died from that infection. He didn't make it. He did not make it. He was like in his 40s. He didn't make it. It's those things happen, and those bacteria are out there, and it really is frightening to me that in order for me to go into a hospital to have something done, I'm going to have to be near death in order to do it. Be like, have a heart attack. Oh, I'll be fine. Don't call an ambulance. I'm good. I'm good. I can live with just half a heart. It'll be okay. don't 911. No, call it. Nobody call it. No. Anyway, pesticide-resistant pests, and of course, say like with herbicides, a lot of people are really crazy about that. I had a friend of mine come over with a lady friend of his, and it was the first time that I had met her, and they just recently started going out. But she came over, and we were kind of sitting in the front, and I was sitting on a bench there on the front patio, and she wanted to just lie back in the grass. And the first question out of her mouth is, do you have any herbicide treatment on this grass? And I said, no, I don't. I said, I've used fertilizer on it, and that's it, which isn't going to hurt anything, just fertilizer. And she said, oh, great. And she was so happy. And she just laid back and just rolled in the grass. And she said, this is so great. She took off her shoes and was running around, and she thought it was, just, I don't know, thought it was so super. She's from, gosh, where was, I don't even remember, but anyway, some area where it's very tropical, and you can't really do that because there are so many bugs. They'll just eat you up. One time I was in a tropical area and I needed to urinate. So I thought, well, this is what I'll do. And it's after, I had been drinking. And, when you drink, you form a lot of urine. It's a diuretic. So I needed to urinate. So we were walking on this road, about 4 of us. And I was like, well, I'll just step off here into the jungle a little bit, maybe 3 or 4 steps, not too far, and just urinate. No big deal. It was at night. And I got about 1 or 2 steps in there, and there were so many things crawling up my leg, I was like, no. I got right back on that road. I thought, I'll just urinate right here. I'm from Texas. It is legal in Texas. This is what we do. That entire road system, it is a urinal in Texas. I'm sure we could get arrested, but anyway. So, no, they don't roll around on grass wherever she was from. I wish I could remember, but I can't. But, she loved that grass. Thought it was super. So, herbicides. A lot of problems with those, for sure. Not good. And I have a real good friend who has a native nursery there in Alpine, and she does not use any grass killers at all. She makes the people who work for her, they have to dig up all the weeds and all the grasses and everything, with hose or whatever in order to get it all up and clean it up and so forth. No Roundup, nothing like that at all. She just refuses. No. You just develop resistant species. That's what you develop, which is really not good at all. Anyway, and of course here we have global climate change, which of course it's going to happen anyway. I do understand that, but it doesn't happen at the rate that it is happening now. It's happening really, really fast, and that's the thing that's scary. Not so much that it's happening, but the rate at which it's happening. That's the thing that's very frightening. And I hope things will be wonderful, and I hope your children will be in good shape, and there will be no problems associated with that at all, and there will be solutions, and life will be grand. I hope that for all of you and your children. Okay, I'm moving on to chapter 2. We certainly don't have time to do that. Looking at my watch, we don't have time to do that. All right, so we'll pick up with chapter 2 on Monday. We do have a lab, so you've got a little bit of time. I tell you what, let's just